Alright, on to our last steps for this composition. We'll be placing in a mysterious artifact into our scene. This is actually inspired from the 1968 movie called 2001 A Space Odyssey. Now go ahead and open up the file called Monolith. Now this is the artifact which appears in that movie. I thought it would be interesting to put this in here. Of course, you can have your own, design your own artifacts to put in your scenes. Let's drag this in onto our landscape. Add it to its own group called the Monolith. Let's convert this into a smart object. Alright, masking this is quite easy. We just need our magic wand tool. Just click on the white area. Hold on your Alt key and click on the add layer mask icon. Right now we need to flip this over. So I'll hit Ctrl T, flip horizontal. Now to find a place to position it, I think this seems to be a good area. It's like where the astronaut is actually looking at. Need to transform this. Let's make it a bit smaller. Alright. It is a bit too dark, so let's add in some levels. Ctrl L. Okay, that's better. Now to clear up our mask a bit, as you can see there are some lines showing up. Let's check our mask. It's coming from this empty area around here. So let's fill the entire thing with black. Marquee tool to select out the outside regions. Hit Ctrl Shift I to inverse it. Fill the entire thing with black. That should take care of those tiny lines. Or click again to come back to our composition. Alright, now we seem to have lost our levels somehow. So let's apply them again. Select the layer and hit Ctrl L. Let's increase the midtone values. Okay. And we need to take care of some of these halos around these edges. So I'm going to select the mask and go to select and mask. Let's shift the edge inside. Add in a bit of feather. That looks good. Okay. Alright, now we need to blend in this monolith here. I want it to be placed behind this tiny rock here. So let's get our placement. So let's get our positioning first. And I'm going to turn it off and make a selection of this area. So let's use our quick selection tool. Make sure sample all layers are checked. Just click. Alright. Let's turn our monolith back on and fill the mask with black on this area. Alright. Let's go ahead and paint in some shadows for our artifact. I'm gonna control click on the add new layer icon to create a layer below. Just rename it as shadows. Get your brush, soft brush. Paint with black with an opacity of about 20. Let's just paint in and slowly build up our shadow. Make sure you set the blend mode of that shadows layer to multiply. Alright, let's zoom out. Now, I don't want this monolith to be just bland like this. Let's apply some texture onto its surface. Go ahead and open up the stone file, stone texture. Let's bring this in. I'll call it stone. Let's transform it. Now this is actually a seamless texture, so we can keep repeating it and it will not have any sharp transitions. Hit enter and let's duplicate it one more time. Just hit your arrow keys to align it, and as you see, it lines up perfectly. Let's get another of these copies, align it to the bottom one. Alright, select all the three and transform it again. Make sure it fills the entire area. Now I'm going to combine this by hitting Ctrl E. So entire thing is a one layer now. Let's clip it to our monolith and change the blend mode to overlay. See, that looks great. A nice tone texture. Alright, our monolith is complete. Let's bring this down over here onto the final touches. I want to change the color of this planet. I think it's a bit coming off as too strong as a visual element, and it's not blending in well with the sky as well. So I'm going to select the texture of that planet. Just change the blend mode to hard light. I'm also going to change the vibrance value. It's kind of a drastic change, but for the composition I think this is much better. You can add in a hue saturation layer on top of this to affect the colors of the planet. I'm gonna just leave it at that. Now on to our final step. Let's take care of the color in the scene. I think to make the planet look really strange, you need to have different color values in the highlights and shadows. Usually in a normal environment you'd see the color from the highlights bleed into the shadows, but for this image, to make it look really alien, you need to have different colors in the highlights and shadows. Now to do this, I'm just gonna add a color balance layer on top of everything. From here you can select the region you want to affect. I'm gonna choose the highlights and let's move it towards green and little blue. For the shadows we'll add more blue in it and also a bit of green. I'm gonna change the blend mode of this layer to color. I think that looks much better, quite alien like. And also our sky seems to be too bright, so I'm gonna select the sky, hit Ctrl L to bring up the levels and darken it a bit. And I'm gonna select the green channel and increase its value. Right, so we are going mainly for a greenish theme. You can have your own colors. I also want to change the color on these lakes. It seems like it's water, but since it's an alien planet, so let's change the color of this liquid. So I'm just gonna use a magic wand tool. Select our landscape and click on the liquid and hold down shift to add in more of the selection. Alright, let's zoom in. Some more here and here. Now with this selection, let's go ahead and create a solid layer. It will add in a mask for us with that selection. So let's choose a greenish color or maybe blue. Green looks better. Click OK. And I'm going to change the blend mode again to color. Let's add some feather to the mask. Double click on the mask to bring up its properties and add in a feather value of about 4. Now there seems to be some missing areas. So let's paint them in with our brush tool. Select the layer mask, hit P to bring up your brush. Using a soft brush and paint in white to add into our mask. Now some of these areas will still be white because it's reflecting the light, and since we have changed the mode to color, it's not going to affect areas which are completely white. And we also need to remove the green from some of these outer edges. So start painting with black. I'll change the opacity to about 50%. Sorry, need to paint with black. Hit X to switch your foreground and background color. You can start painting it. Another technique which you can use to get rid of this color from the darker areas is to use something called as the luminance blending. To get that option, you just double click on the layer and go down here. These are our blending options. Now from the underlying layer, we want to exclude our top layer from the darker areas. Just click on this icon and keep dragging it until you see the color disappear from the darker areas. As you see, it's working. Now to have a softer blend, hold on Alt and separate these two arrows. Let's drag in this one further. I think that's working fine here. Click OK. Now this still feels a bit too intense, so I'm gonna reduce the opacity to about 70 by hitting 7 on the number pad. Okay, that looks better. I think the color blend mode is not working so well for these brighter areas, so I'm gonna just change the blend mode back to normal and reduce the opacity to about 50 by hitting 5 on the number pad. I think that's much better. I'm gonna add a curves adjustment to the entire composition to increase the contrast a bit. Right? And I'll change the opacity to about 50%. Another great way of experimenting with color and to get new ideas is to use the color lookup table. It's an adjustment layer called color lookup, and you can cycle through this LUT files, which can also download from the internet. There are quite a few. Is just cycle through this to get different looks for your image. It can give you really intense and a completely different look on your composition. See how different our image is looking. I'm gonna use the 3-strip look here. It's adding a very mild saturation to the image, as you can see. Now I want to change the blend mode to color. Just have it affect our image slightly. Before, after. The slight change in our sky. There's a slight saturation increase. Alright, now before we call it a finish, let's turn on our black and white layer to check if the brightness values are consistent. And we simply have clearly forgot to manage the brightness values on our monolith. So go ahead and select the levels on the monolith layer. Double click to open it. And change the output levels of the black to reduce the contrast. Alright, at this point it seems to be matching with the contrast of the rocks around it. Click OK. Turn off the black and white layer. That's much better. Let's also turn on our red fill layer to check for the color values. The colors here on the monolith seems to be too saturated. That's coming from our stone texture. If you isolate it, you can see it has some red color onto it. So the best way to deal with this is to just desaturate this layer. So I'm going to hit Control Shift U. There you go, it has a much natural blend now. Turn off the red fill and you can see it's blending in really well. Now that's our final composition for this chapter.